The biggest myth is that entrepreneurs know what they're doing. One of the things that I feel is from outside in, the world makes entrepreneurs seem like demigods or some superhumans. And therefore, you begin to think that do I have what it takes to go through this particular journey?
And to call myself an entrepreneur.
To call myself an entrepreneur.
I am Sandeep Jethwani, co-founder of Deserve.
We believe that folks like you and me work really hard on a day-to-day basis to accumulate capital for our families, for the aspirations that we have. The question was that do we truly get what we deserve when it comes to our investments?
What's the connection between finance and emotions, especially in a country like India?
95% of the finance behaviors is how we think as human beings. Okay, we are not rational people. We are not people who are completely dispassionate when it comes to money. Fear and greed cycle, Gaurav, is classic.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. Such a pleasure having you here. So finally, you are here on this podcast, The X Monks Drive.
Yeah, Gaurav, thanks so much for having me and great to be here. I know it's been a long time in the making, but I'm hoping the conversation will be worth your while.
I'm sure. It took us some time. Yeah, a lot of to and fro, a lot of back and forth, and finally you are here. I'm absolutely honored to have you, Sandeep. Thank you so much for making time for this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for thinking of us, Gaurav.
Sandeep, whatever little I've known about you, the research that we could do, the people that I could interact with, all the posts that I have followed on your LinkedIn, I found you so grounded. I found you so sincere in what you're doing. I believe that our childhood plays a very vital role in helping us become who we are. What are those traits that you have picked up from your childhood that you continue to cherish and leverage today as well?
So, Gaurav, I'll just a little bit of context about the childhood. And I grew up in a middle class background. My parents were both public sector bankers. I was born in Nagpur, lived there for the first 10, 15 years of my life, and then moved to Bombay. And I think the first big inflection point in life was that relocation. So as a student, I was doing really well in Nagpur. When I moved to Bombay, suddenly I realized that the world is much tougher than. So it's a very humbling experience at
It
that point.
is.
Right? And I think that was one of the things that made a huge difference to how I approached everything.
Yeah.
Had I continued being in Nagpur, I would have probably had a massive chip on my shoulder, etc. But Mumbai is really humbling for the best of people. So that was one thing. The second thing was that mom and dad were and all have always been about hard work, about consistency of effort. As a family, it was all about like moving ahead one step at a time, doing right, and then benefiting from it. So I think some of those cultural values that came from my parents were very, very important. Uh, because from their perspective, also their life was a series of progressive events, things that took them one step ahead. Because their parents came to India when the partition happened, and sort of from a relatively affluent background in the undivided India to coming to India when I have nothing and literally like staying in a almost like a slum kind of a situation and then building back your life from there is what they saw, and they were like trying to inculcate that into us, that they wanted us to have a better life than what they had. And I think some of those things, that the sense of aspiration that we have to do better, work really hard, I think those were learnings from their sort of lives that I still continue. And even today, I think they are like they want us to be aspirational. They want we are three brothers. They want us to be like do better and work hard and do what is right. So I think some of those things come from parents. And the other thing was this whole switch from Nagpur to Mumbai.
Thank you for sharing. There's so many aspects of your life, Sandeep, that I can relate to. I come from very similar background. And the other day I was talking to my father, where he was talking about that, how he came to India from a small village called Bela in Pakistan.
Okay.
And he was just reciting few of the memories, that there was a mountain where he would say something and the voice would echo back.
Yeah.
And he would say, Pahadi o pahadi, tera pyo mare ki teri maa. And the echo would say, teri maa. And that's the kind of stories that he would share with me. And I could also relate to the other part of your life when you shared that from Nagpur to Mumbai. I did my engineering, by the way, from Nagpur, Priyadarshini College.
Okay, nice.
And Nagpur has a very different charm at the same time, but I think the challenges and the exposure that Mumbai provides you, I don't think that was there at that point in time in Nagpur. Now I've heard that Nagpur has grown several folds. It has developed multi-folds. So yeah,
absolutely. I think small cities have their charm. And when you juxtapose that with a big city hustle, I think together you get something very, very unique.
So true. Tell me more about transition. What does transition mean to you? When you transition from Nagpur to Mumbai, a new world opened up for you. What are the different emotions that you went through during that transition? I'm sure there was a sense of loss, and then there was an excitement of something new.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has stayed with me is this whole sense of discomfort that you first have. And discomfort maybe is a mild word, but actually internally there's a lot of upheaval happening, that you're not only giving up your social circle, but your comfort zone, your reputation also, you're sort of starting from scratch all over again. And I think that was a period which sort of formed me, made me into a much more sort of responsible, stable human being. So I always think of it like when something is put under pressure, that's when it turns into diamond, right? And I think that is truly transformative in the sense that transformation is a combination of two things. First is a combination of pressure and stress, and then what comes out of it and how you hone that. So I think it's both a tough period and a positive period put together. For me, it's almost become addictive that once you get to a point in life where things are stable and everything is going fine, you're like, okay, now what can I do differently?
You look for those kind of environment where you know that once you respond to that environment in a particular way, you would get transformed. So we get addicted to meeting.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like slightly sadistic if you like you want to put yourself through trouble again to get ahead in life, because you know that good things only come out of when you put yourselves in uncomfortable situations. Like there is no progress without discomfort. Like that's a given, right? And if therefore there is comfort, that means there is potentially less progress, right? So at every stage, and this has sort of happened in multiple, like now 4 or 5 times in my life, where I felt that if I'm getting comfortable, I get concerned that am I growing, am I stagnating, and therefore like okay, let's do something which is different.
Beautiful. Sandeep would love to talk about this, not during this conversation, but some other time. If that's the belief that I'm living my life from, am I actually living? Because what I'm listening right now is, unless I'm going through difficult times, I'm not growing.
Yeah.
So difficult times is equal to growth. Let's take one step forward. You come from a background where both the parents were working. What led you to get into entrepreneurship?
So in my previous role, obviously was doing well and had achieved a certain sort of stature within the company. There was a certain amount of financial growth that had happened alongside it. At that time, when I was rethinking my whole career journey, I was 39. The question was that I have this next 20-25 years of real hard work ahead of me. How can I make it really more valuable, and not valuable in terms of capital, because I think capital follows effort. Is there something meaningful that I can do with my time, right? And that sort of sense of the fact that now I'm very comfortable with what I'm doing and I need to put myself through discomfort to achieve the next thing, to grow as an individual, to learn aspects which I today don't have as a part of my personality. I think that was the whole motivation. And the catalyst was actually one of my co-founders, Webhub, who one day sat me down and said, Sandeep, why are you not breaking out of this? You have the potential. We collectively can build something big. Let's now go for it. And that became the catalyst. So there was discomfort that with the comfort that I had, but now you need a trigger, you need a point when you say, okay, now I need to wake up and smell the coffee. I'll just add one more thing, Gaurav. It was triggered by our company going public also. Like the previous company that we founded in 2008 went public in 2019. And that's when you start thinking about, okay, now what's next in life, right? What do you do?
Let me smell the
Smelling
coffee.
Yeah. So that for me was the moment at which we decided that we'll do something together. At that time, the idea was very amorphous. Broadly, we knew that we understand one business in India, which is investment management. How do we build something large, meaningful, scalable in investment management with the right culture? All of those things were important for us.
Yeah. And what was those initial hiccups, inhibitions, hesitations, fears that you dealt with?
I think it was a journey of self-confidence building, right? One of the things that I feel is from outside in, the world makes entrepreneurs seem like demigods or some super humans, right? Where that entrepreneurs are doing so much and this, that, the other. And therefore, you begin to think that do I have what it takes to go through this particular journey, right?
And to call myself an entrepreneur.
To call myself an entrepreneur, because there is so much like attached to that word, especially when you look from social media perspective, etc. That sometimes I think we overcomplicated life, right? There's so much of all of this media glorification around entrepreneurs that you almost start believing that can I ever be like that, right? And you start questioning that.
Yeah.
And that's when, one of the sort of unfair advantages we had in my previous role, I was a wealth manager. And as wealth managers, you meet a lot of entrepreneurs and you get to sit down with them. And after a point, when you get comfortable, you can have candid conversations. And that's when, the realization struck that they were normal people like you and me, right? And they were like doing their thing, they were working really hard. And success comes over a period of time. And I think that made sort of emboldened us. And one thing that, one person told me, he said that if you've even thought about this aspect that you want to go independent and start something, you're already on that path. Now you can't pull back, because either if you pull back, you'll have this regret thing all your life. Most people will now jump in. So now that even the thought has crossed your mind, and the fact that you're having this conversation with me means that you should now get into this process. So I think that was the one big thing where you felt that, okay, entrepreneurs are people like us, and we can also achieve it.
Yeah. This actually reminds me of a poem by Khalil Gibran. I'm sure you would have read that. It's known as Fear. The poem goes like this. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled, from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forest and villages. And in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter, there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. That's how the poem goes. While I was listening to you, it just came to me that the very thought that you would like to do something of your own, you cannot pull back.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that becomes your life's mission. even if you might not be doing it at that point, everything that you're working towards today is building towards that, right? Sometimes self-development, which I strongly believe in, is very important. Like, what are the gaps in your knowledge base stroke personality that you need to either complement, be aware of, or work on? Like, when I look back, what would I have said that I have done? So I think COVID was like that moment where we could move forward because of that.
Yeah. And I could relate to that. I think that's who you are, Sandeep, because you mentioned that when the environment is forcing you or there are difficulties around you, how you respond to that helps you become who you are. You also spoke about, Sandeep, about life's mission. How did you come up with the name Deserve? And what's the philosophy or the mission behind that?
So, the philosophy actually, Gaurav, was very simple. We believe that uh, folks like you and me work really hard on a day-to-day basis to accumulate capital for our families, for the aspirations that we have. India inherently is a very aspirational country, right? Today, we are transforming from hopefully, where we are a low per capita income country to potentially a larger per capita income country, right? The question was that do we truly get what we deserve when it comes to our investments? The challenge in India for us was that there were a lot of people who were creating meaningful surpluses in their portfolios, but did not have the kind of handholding or support that they deserved. So that was the emotion that led to the name Deserve. That we all have worked so hard. We've spent time away from our families and our loved ones to build what we have. We deserve better than what we are currently getting.
Yeah. And what we deserve. Sandeep, since you're talking about emotion, and I told you I come from a lower middle class family, very humbling background. I think with that comes the charm of living with your family members, your brothers and your sisters.
Sure.
Those fights and those laughters continue to shape us who we are. The emotion that comes to my mind when I think of finance is risk. And especially for people who come from middle class family, as much as I choose to believe that I deserve this and I deserve better than that, along with that, every time when I think of finance, money, there's a hidden risk. There's a fear that I continue to deal with. That what if I lose everything that I have? What's your take on that? And what's the connection between finance and emotions, especially in a country like India?
There's a great writer around finance. His name is Morgan Housel. He's a very popular book called Psychology of Money.
Yeah.
And there's one line which he's written, which says that personal finance is more about personal than about finance, right? The unfortunate part is finance is taught as a thing about numbers, math, statistics.
Yeah.
Whereas actually that's just maybe 5% of the reality. 95% of the finance is behaviors, is how we think as human beings. Everything that our evolution has got us to this point is actually what is influencing our investment decisions. We are not rational people. We are not people who are completely dispassionate when it comes to money. Everyone's situation is fundamentally different. So, like you said, there are people who have concerns that if I make this investment and things go wrong, what will happen to my life? What will happen to my future generations? Will I be able to support their growth and education and health? What will happen to my retirement? And I think truly being cognizant of that is the first hallmark of a great investment manager. One of the things that we are very focused on is the fact that we should not lose more money for our user or client than what they can sleep with. And this comes from our real experience of living through 2008 crisis, when even the wealthiest of people at the bottom of the market, when the market had fallen 60-70%, portfolios were down. So imagine if you invested 5 crores, you were left with 1 crore or something like that, right? At that point, people have turned around and told me that, Sandeep, I never want to invest in equity. Please move all that money, that remaining 1 crore, into fixed income or fixed deposits. And I would tell them that, but you'll be immortalizing the loss. You're booking the loss. And now you're in a situation where for one to go back to five will take you maybe 2 decades. Whereas if you just stay invested, you can actually recover it in a few years. Every single one of those conversations ended in the client saying that I'll move money to fixed income. I don't want to, I can't deal with this stress. Right.
Yeah. It's the fear of loss.
Fear of loss
is greater than the excitement of the gains that they might have. But I think isn't the same psychology a gambler lives his life from? What's the difference between a gambler who's gambling and someone who has got hard-earned money and investing in all these investments?
So I think that fear and greed cycle, Gaurav, is classic, right? So when the markets are going up, everyone feels good, because not only are the markets going up, everything around your life is seeming positive. Your salaries are going up.
Yeah.
You're getting more job offers. You're hearing great news in the newspapers. You're feeling generally good about yourself. You feel that the world is in a good place. I'm getting better, right?
Yeah.
When things are down, not only is your portfolio down, but you're facing job losses, you're hearing about
everything
people laid off, all negative news, right? And it gets exacerbated. So one of the few questions that we try and test when we engage with investors is, what truly is the loss that this investor can handle? Somebody in the peak of the markets, they will say that I can handle 25% loss. We try and ask this question in various ways to figure out what is the real loss. And sometimes we realize that, okay, this person can handle only a 10% loss. And therefore, the portfolio is created from that perspective. When is the biggest damage, or when will people make the worst decisions, is when the loss in their portfolio is more than that they can tolerate. That time, irrationality takes over. So making sure that you assess what is the loss rate and building a portfolio to control for that is actually the real job of a wealth manager or an investment manager. India is a great market. Long term, you will make money if you do the right things. But if you lose more money than you can handle, you will make the worst decisions at that point of your life.
Yeah, I can relate to that, because when the person is going through the cycle which is down, and that is where a person's ability to think rationally gets hampered. The person gets blinded with his fear and tries to protect everything she or he is left with.
Over millions of years, Gaurav, human beings have operated in jungles where there was life-threatening issues that were happening, right? If they were attacked by, let's say, a tiger, and what is the first instinct at that time? The brain shuts down and your instinct is flight. Run from this situation, right? And that's exactly what happens when it comes to investing. When you're faced with a portfolio which has fallen much more than you can handle, your primal instincts will take over of flight. Let's get out and run from here, right?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is something that we need to be cognizant of as we are going through those emotions also.
In that situation, I'm sure you would have somebody in your team who is considered to be the top wealth manager. What traits, behaviors the person has that allows him or her to take care of their clients?
At the worst points in the market situation, when the portfolio is down, a lot of wealth managers go into a shell themselves. Okay. We'll spend a minute on the wealth manager psychology.
Yeah.
What is the wealth manager faced with? His or her own portfolio is down. So he or she is also depressed. He or she knows that if they call the client will be upset with them. So they do not call the client. And in a way, they try and shrink back into their zone and hope that this will blow over. Okay. That is the absolute worst thing that you can do as a wealth manager.
Precisely.
A great wealth manager may not talk to their clients when markets are up, but they will talk to their client every single day that the market is down. They will over communicate. They will reach out. They will talk about how the client is feeling. Sometimes, even if you only give a client an opportunity to speak their mind, you are doing a great service to them, right?
Just by talking to them.
Simply just listening.
Yeah.
What does a client want to know? A client wants to know is that a well-meaning person is on the job on my portfolio at all points of time. That's all that every client wants to be reassured with. Markets are down, but I'm on it. I'm working for you. I'm figuring out what to do, right? So what for me separates a great wealth manager from somebody who is not is how they behave when markets are down and how they engage with the client at that time. Everything else during bull markets, etc., is all good.
Yeah, yeah. You know, this reminds me of my conversation with Rajesh, who is the country head for Perfect India. And this conversation happened during the COVID times. COVID just hit in. I remember my conversation with him in the month of August 2019. It was almost like 5-6 months. We were already in the pitch dark space in the history of humanity. And I said, how are you managing that? He said something so remarkable and so profound, and I can connect with what you're talking about right now. He said, I ensure that I speak to 10 people from my organization on a daily basis. And when I'm saying that I'm talking to 10 people, this is irrespective of whether they are reporting into me directly or not. I'm talking to the team members in the organization. And he said that I've spoken to the janitors, I've spoken to the office boys, I've spoken to the people who are working at the grassroots level, and I've spoken to the vice presidents, I've spoken to the marketing heads as well. I just want to communicate and want to let them know that I'm here. We are together.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what you are talking about. And I think that is where communication is so very important, Sandeep. Thank you for bringing that aspect of a manager, of a leader, of a fellow human being, I guess.
You know, there are two parts. When you say leadership and wealth management or leadership and sales, one very common thing is the assumption with communication is it's that as a leader or salesperson, you are communicating or you are speaking. But communication as a great leader or a salesperson is about listening. And
100%.
Just doing that, I think, is 90% of the battle.
I think listening is a gift that you can give to anyone. And I often share in my interactions, I said, listen to the other person as if you're listening to the universe, nature, or God. Yeah. And when I know that I'm talking to God right now, when I know that I'm listening to universe, why would I open my mouth? I would rather listen to you. Sandeep, let's take one step forward. In the fintech industry where you are operating in, I think security, confidentiality is paramount. You cannot compromise on that.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think? What is the role of a manager? What's the role of a leader to ensure that all the team members in her team, in his team, they address the confidentiality and security? At the same time, there has to be transparency that has to be maintained in the system. And it's like walking on a tightrope.
I think this is a very interesting thing because, one of the fundamental things that Deserve we believe in is transparency. I think Deserve wouldn't exist if... So one thing that we went to this process of data democratization. What is data democratization? The entire firm's P&L, growth, assets under management, month on month, is visible to every single individual in the company. Okay. And the belief that it stems from is that given that every single individual in the company is a shareholder in the company because of the ESOPs that they own, the company is responsible to them as shareholders. So we think of it as our duty, therefore, to share this data. So that in itself galvanizes everyone because it makes them feel a part of the mission. Sometimes we obviously share our successes, but we also share our failures in the part of that, right? And one concern that everyone had going in, that if we share our failures, what if people lose comfort in the vision of Deserve, right? But in fact, what I've seen is the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Where people say that, okay, this is a problem we are facing. Let me help you. I'll figure this out. And then it just sort of gets the entire company going, right? So I think that was the transparency aspect. Like you rightly said, in the business that we are in, confidentiality, uh, not sharing client data is this whole very important thing. See, there's two ways of addressing that. You have to say that this is the company's policy, security, protocols, SOPs, etc. That's one way of thinking about it, and that's required and is important. But why are we doing that is more important, and that stems for us from customer centricity. I am the custodian of the customer's information.
Precisely.
And because we want to do right by the customer, because it's great for our business if I do right for the customer, therefore we have to do various things, including confidentiality. So once this communication is clear that customer centricity is important, then a lot of things become clear. You can shape a lot of things in business model around it. I'll give you one example of something that we are doing on this side. We said that what is it that customers want when they deal with a wealth manager in the context of the fees that the wealth manager charges. When you spoke to a bunch of customers, people said one thing, that I don't mind paying fees if I make money. So we said this here is an insight for us. What is the customer telling us? The customer is telling us that they are willing to share their upside with us if there is upside, but if there is no upside, they don't want us to make money. And therefore, our largest portfolio management structures are under zero fixed fees, only a share of profit. Right? And that's like a new thing in this industry. How do I make that business model work for me as a company is the second thing, right? And I need to figure that out. That is my challenge as a business leader, to figure out how this will be economically viable for the company. And I think so, therefore, transparency and customer centricity have to go together. And everything that you do as a business, therefore, derives from customer centricity. Confidentiality of the customer's data is one part of that. Security of information is one part of that. We have over-invested in security. I mean, arguably, one criticism of Deserve could be that as a company of our scale, why are we investing so much capital in it? But I feel that if we do right by the customer will reward us with better business in the long term.
Just out of curiosity, I'm sure when you're bringing these kind of ideas in the system, you would have disagreements as well.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a firm believer that disagreements are a very important, a very integral part of any team, any system. How do you ensure as a leader, as a co-founder, as a manager, as a team member, that all those disagreements are leading to innovations and better solutions rather than creating bitterness in the system?
So we did two things around this. One is challenge, disagree, commit as a value at Deserve. That it's written on our, you come to our office and you mentioned coming to the BKC building,
Yes.
come to our office, it's on the walls. One of the walls says challenge, disagree, commit. We want to talk about it more often, right? Because a lot of things, feedback, new ideation, etc. comes from that. The second part is that how do you not let ego come in the way? And there, the one thing is that whenever such an event happens, it's my job as a leader to sit the two parties down and say that both of you are saying or doing what you're recommending because you believe that is right for Deserve. Okay. Let's look at it from that lens. It's not X's idea.
It's about what is good for Deserve.
Once that baseline is set, that everyone is arguing for their point of view because it is good for Deserve and not because it's their idea, then you see barriers breaking down dramatically. Then it becomes into a problem-solving discussion rather than me versus
ego
them.
hassle.
And that a lot of it is because of our hiring, the way we hire people, right? It's a long process. Arguably, we are very slow to recruit because 7-8 meetings or discussions, immersion in the office before we even roll out a job offer, right? Which slows us down, but I feel that in the long run, it just accelerates growth. So I think that is something that's really helped us, that you get people to align that your intent needs to be pro-Deserve. And if that is the case, everything else is welcome. Please fight, argue, debate, but believe that you and the other person are both arguing for the same long-term objective, which is what is right for Deserve.
And I think that requires a lot of maturity at an individual's level, because, and I'm talking about myself at times, that I get blinded with my ego.
Yeah.
And when I'm blinded with my ego, I can't see what is right, what is wrong.
Yeah.
Because this is the same space when I know there's an external threat, and the only thing that matters to me is to protect my own identity.
Yes. Yes.
Has it happened with you, Sandeep, where you got stuck with your own fears and inhibitions, and that actually blinded you to take a discrete decision for the organization? And what process did you go through to get out of that?
Yeah, I think
confront yourself.
Yeah, this has happened multiple times, where what happens is, in the heat of the discussion, you become one with your idea, right?
Yeah.
So idea is you are the idea, and so on, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly it's about, all the defense mechanisms come up, and fight or flight, everything goes up, right?
Yeah.
So that has happened multiple times. I think one of the things that has really helped me is, once I go back and have conversations with either my spouse, my wife, or my coach, where I say that today this happened, and my wife Dipti, she'll be like, okay, so why did you say this? Okay, so then why did you think of it that way? Like recently, there was a conversation about bringing a senior person on board, and the potential team leader was not aligned with it. Very soon it became a sort of argument kind of thing. And then when I went back and realized that, why is that person thinking or behaving like that? And the next day I went back and said that I made a mistake. I approached this conversation all wrong. And maybe let's start afresh. Okay, let's start with, here is what Deserve needs. This is what capabilities we have. These are capabilities we do not have in the team. Now let's solve for it. If bringing on the senior person is the answer to that, we'll do that. If you think there are other ways to solve it, let's work on that as well, right? And suddenly the conversation became so much more productive. So I think sometimes it's a function of sort of learning and stepping back. We all make mistakes. And I think, but the thing is, the next morning, do you go back and say that, okay, I think I made a mistake. Let's sit down and start all over again.
Yeah. It's so humbling listening to you, Sandeep. Genuinely thank you for giving this time. For me, this is just a beautiful masterclass. I'm a firm believer that the journey of a leader is the journey of a human being. And what I'm listening right now, I'm humbled by what you are bringing and giving to this industry. I'm not talking about the organization. I think we need more leaders like you who are able to take a step back and say, hey, who am I being right now? What am I up to here? I mean, why am I fighting? Can I start from scratch? And as a founder, going back to your team and saying, hey, apologies. Just imagine the kind of environment which would get created. So fresh, so empowering. Out of curiosity, there's so much of insecurity in the environment today. Especially, I call this the season of layoffs. 10,000 laid off. 5,000 they have been laid off. This company has laid off so and so people. How do you ensure that you provide a sense of security to your team members?
Yeah, to be very honest, we have not been faced with that problem, but I have a thesis around that, right? So, we were slow to grow the team size because we come from a very different upbringing in terms of even our careers, right? The last 5 or 10 years was a lot of relatively easy capital being available, and therefore that was spurring growth in terms of team sizes and so on. But the time in which we had built our careers in 2007, 8, 9, we had seen the cycles go up, things go down really badly. That we were we will only hire somebody if the existing team is at 110% capacity. They're already stretched. That's when we will bring somebody on. So therefore, we have been slow to recruit. And therefore, when this whole cycle came up in our all hands, every time I keep addressing that we have capital, we are not inflated, therefore everyone is secure. I think sometimes just calling that out is required, because it's leaving it unsaid is also dangerous, because people might start hearing news around and start getting worried, right? So that is one. The second thing which we did along the way was to also be honest to ourselves and say that if somebody is not meeting the talent bar that we have within the company, we give feedback, we talk about how we can get better. But at the end of that 3, 6, 9 month period, we have a frank conversation that how can I help you move to a place where your sort of achievements will be better recognized, be better suited, and then have a process for that person to transition out, right? I think that is very important on an ongoing basis, because if you're not honest to yourselves, your team, etc., then you suddenly accumulate a lot of flab, and then you have to do it in one go at a certain point, which is a huge demotivator for everyone else.
Rest of the team members.
I think, and if however that situation can still arise, right? A lot of things can change, and I think the only way to, for me, I feel, to deal with is with honesty. To say that, look, this is the strategy which we had. This has not worked. This is the amount of capital that we have. We have to all optimize for what is right for Deserve. And therefore, if a certain part of the team has to move on, we have to figure out help and support for them. But honestly, just delaying that conversation will hurt more people, including the ones being laid off, because you're reducing the time that they have available to figure out alternatives for themselves.
So you spoke about it's important to be honest to your team members. And out of curiosity, what are your practices? One is, I heard you that you go back to your confidants, you go back to your wife, you go back to your coach. What are your other practices that help you stay grounded and ensure that you stay fair, honest to your organization and to your team members?
Some of this are very tactical, Gaurav, and I think, to be very honest, I'm still learning. Who is listening to this should take this with a pinch of salt, and maybe if there are better ways of doing it, find a way to let me know on LinkedIn. I think for me, the bringing in of OKRs in the company was a big game changer, right? Because it centers the company around the goals that we have in this quarter, this 6 month, this year, right? And those goals are very visible and to everyone. And just having those goals being visible to everyone means that everyone is working in that direction. Sometimes this is left unsaid in a lot of organizations. कि हम क्या कर रहे हैं is known but not like on the walls, not visible to everyone. I think that for setting the OKRs for me was very, very helpful. Okay, and honestly, I didn't see the value in it for a long time. It was actually pushed by one of our board members who said that, okay, you start this process, and if at the end of 4 quarters you believe it's not required, I'm okay if you pull it back. The second thing which I learned from actually our team, which had worked in consumer tech companies, is that there needs to be a strong internal feedback mechanism. And feedback is multiple ways, right? It's like I'm giving feedback, I'm also receiving feedback, and they are also giving feedback about the other leaders or other team members that they are working with. And structuring that into a quarterly process was another thing that was very helpful, right? Sometimes it just brings to 4 things which you are blind spots for you as in your behavior, right? One of the things that I got in one of my recent feedbacks was that I don't communicate the tough or the negative parts soon enough, and I need to do that faster.
So that was the feedback given to you, that you don't share that tough feedback easily.
Yeah, that I should do it fast so that the person can work on it before it becomes too late, right? And that I recognize that, yeah, I'm probably bad at it. Sometimes I just push it back by कि बाद में बात कर लेंगे यार, थोड़ा uncomfortable conversation. And I think some of that really helps everyone. And imagine from a perspective of the person who's telling me this, they are feeling that they were able to get it off their chest. That in itself is helping them feel better. I am receiving feedback, so I can work on it. And even within us founders, we are 3 founders, right? We have set this monthly cadence. Like as founders, we work together all the time. We don't need to do it, but we have calendarized our monthly catch up where each one of, the 2 out of 3 founders are meeting one-on-one, right? And I have this running document with each of my co-founders that this is the feedback you gave me. This is the feedback I gave you. And in the next meeting, we just review that, okay, have I been able to improve or work towards that? Sometimes we say, okay, I will not take this feedback. Like, Weber will tell me, Sandeep, you should do this. And I'll tell him that, no, Weber, I won't do this because of these reasons. This is why I'm behaving the way I'm behaving. Okay. So sometimes you note it that this is, we agreed to disagree on this particular aspect.
Yeah. So what I'm listening is implementing OKR assisted you, the feedback mechanism and the accountability partnerships that you have, if I may call that. And I think what I'm listening is that it's extremely important to have a regular cadence in the system that will allow you to be a better human being and to become a better manager and to become a better leader as well. Sandeep, before you gotten into this space and now you are leading an organization that has been funded, growing really well, has a good reputation in the market, what were your assumptions that you carried for the longest period of time, which are getting challenged today?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question, actually. So, I think one of the things was that as a leader, one approach is the fact that the leader decides everything. Going into this, I knew that that approach won't work, especially if you're working with a highly talented, highly motivated group of people, right? They want to express themselves and be able to take ownership for their successes and failures, right? So they want autonomy. The other extreme was that the leader giving full and complete autonomy and completely stepping back, right? And hoping that the team will handle it. I think what I've realized is it's neither of the two.
Yeah.
You need to strike a balance between. There are times when you need to say that, okay, this is aligned with the vision of the company. This is not aligned with the vision of the company. And therefore, in this tiebreaker, I will take a call. And just figuring out that judgment of when to intervene and when not to is the learning I believe that every leader needs to develop. And it's an on-the-job sort of learning, right?
I think that's a huge sense of maturity, when to say yes, when to say no, what to say yes to and what to say no to. I remember today only in the morning, I was reading something and it said that launching iPhone was not the initial decision of Steve Jobs. Initially, Steve Jobs said no to that. And after a lot of debate and arguments with two of his team members, they decided to launch iPhone. And just imagine, if not for iPhone, where would have been Apple?
Absolutely.
Right? Sandeep, right now we are talking about the assumptions that you had and that got challenged, right? One is that it's the leader's responsibility to take all the decisions. It's leader's responsibility to give autonomy. And in between, you have to find your sweet spot.
Yeah.
That is from the inside out. What do you think, having walked this path, if people look at an entrepreneur or a founder from the outside view, what are the myths that people tend to carry and are absolutely not true at your level?
The biggest myth is that entrepreneurs know what they're doing.
We are just figuring it out.
And I was talking to one of my co-founders yesterday that, in hindsight, like what we've done seems like a perfect, single linear path, right?
Linear path.
But it was nowhere close to linear. I mean, we made so many mistakes, we pulled back and we went forward and back and forth, right? I wish I knew this earlier. Like anybody who's looking at an entrepreneur or looking at all these media articles, looking at all the LinkedIn posts and the Twitter posts, etc., it seems like it's a perfect, thought through.
It's not. 1, 2, 3 and done. Boom, you're an entrepreneur today.
One of the things, 2016, when the demon happened, I was at a conference where Vijay Shekhar was speaking, and the person who was interviewing him on the stage asked him that Paytm has been an overnight success because demon happened and you benefited from it. He said, we have been an overnight success who's been at it for the last 19 years.
Yeah.
We started in 1997. It was 2016 when Demon happened, right? So suddenly you can attribute everything to Demon or his vision and insight, but he'd been at it for 19 years. A lot of people would have given up in that time.
Precisely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandeep, for sharing your wisdom, your experiences. Just a last question. If you were to give a piece of advice to your younger self, what would you do more of? What would you do less of?
what would I do? Let me tell you what would I do less of, right? I would do less of judgments. Like I would not, like everyone behaves in a certain way because of the context and the background that they come from. And one of the things is that you rush to judgment very soon, right? One thing I recently tweeted about it. If somebody else is successful, you feel they were because they were lucky. If you were successful, you feel that it was because you were intelligent. Actually, it's neither. Both of you just worked hard.
Yeah.
Right. So I wish I would be less judgmental as a early professional or earlier on my career. What would I do more of? I think I would have more confidence in my own abilities. I think, and that's where I try and help my kids, that because confidence allows you to act on opportunities that you spot, right? Not passing judgments allows you to spot more opportunities. Confidence allows you to act on them, right? And I think these are the two things that I would do differently.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. Love it when you said that have less judgments and have more confidence on self. Others are winning because they worked hard. You are winning because you are working hard. At the same time, I would just add one more thing. Others are winning because they have been blessed. I'm winning because I'm blessed.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Sandeep, for your time, my friend. Such a pleasure listening to you. I would revisit my statement that we need more leaders, more entrepreneurs, more human beings, more fellow travelers, more friends like you. Thank you.
You're doing a great job with this podcast. You said you've done over 100 podcasts already. I think the kind of messages that you're putting out there in the universe, I think it'll help a lot of people.
And my request to you would be revisit this assumption and the belief that difficult times is equal to growth. What if it's not true? What are the opportunities I'm not tapping in? What are those beautiful moments that I'm not tapping in? Be with this thought and we'll have another discussion. Thank you so much. Take care. Stay blessed.